Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where I share updates on my game development journey. So usually I've been sharing updates on the game I'm making called Snowstorm, but I felt like I needed to take a quick break from that and just kind of making sure that anything that I've learned, I really internalize it. And so I kind of tried to build a bunch of mini games, and I felt like it would be a good opportunity to share with any other game developer enthusiasts kind of how to get started to build very basic games with LÖVE 2D. And so today I'm gonna I'm gonna walk through building a very basic game that I've just pulled up on the screen. So essentially, you're this little round ball here, and you're on a screen that has a 2-point area and a 1-point area and a score. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as high a score as possible. And what you've got is a kind of a goalie here, the white square that's moving up and down. And so if you press the space bar, you shoot a projectile, and if the goalie blocks it, then you lose points. Depending on whether you're in the 2-point area or the 1-point area, you lose more or less. And then if it doesn't block it and it hits the end of the screen, then you'll get more points. And so your goal is to get as many points as possible. So it's very basic, and yeah, we're going to build this from scratch today. So let me open Visual Studios here. So what I've done is I've created a new repo called basic2, and this is where we're going to code everything. So to get started, I'm going to create a love.load function where essentially we're going to load all of our variables and in-game logic that needs to be loaded upon opening the game. The second function we're going to put here is the key pressed function, and that's going to take a user input that we're going to call key. The third function we'll use is the love.update function. So this is a pretty important function. This is the one that tracks any updates to the game from user inputs or any kind of logic that's been defined in your functions. And then the fourth function we're going to use is going to be love.draw, which is going to be used to render everything to the screen. Perfect. Perfect. So to get started, we're going to create a playable window. So I'm going to call it window height. I'm going to set that to 500, 600 pixels fine, but 500 pixels. And then window width, and we're going to set that to 500 pixels as well. So now we've got like a window. We're going to essentially need to create that window. And so for that, we're going to do love.window.set mode. There we go. It's going to take our window height, there we go, window width, and then window height, although it's the same value, so it's not super important. And what we're going to do is we're also going to pass a table where we're essentially full screen. We're not going to allow it to be full screen, so we're going to set that to false. And then we're going to not make it resizable. I'm going to set that to false as well, so that we can't temper with like the resolution of it. The other thing we're going to do to make our lives easier, we're going to add a key press event here. So essentially, if key pressed essentially is equal to the escape key, then we're going to quit the game. So love.event.quit. There we go. Oops. Perfect. And so now we're going to start drawing stuff to the screen. So if I go back to the demo game that we're going to recreate, what we're going to start with is just draw the score, the 2-point area, this line in the middle of the screen, and then the 1-point area. So let's do that. Okay, let me close out of that. Perfect. So let's start with, the easiest one is going to be the love.graphic line. So we're going to do the line first. So the line essentially give it a x and y starting point and end point. So since it's going straight down the middle of the screen, the x points are going to be the same, and then the y point is going to be the top of the screen, so y0, and the bottom of the screen, which essentially is our y height. Because in LÖVE 2D, as y gets bigger, essentially you move down the screen. As y gets smaller, you move up up the screen. So let's do that. Window width, and it's in the middle of the screen, so we're going to divide by 2, 0, and then window width, divide by 2, and then window height. Perfect. The next graphic we're going to put on the screen is our score. So what we're going to do is we're going to print on the screen. So we're going to print the word score. We're going to put a colon and a space. And it's going to be at the top left of the screen. So it's going to be coordinate x0 and y0. And then we need to delineate or limit the size of the screen. So that's going to be the window width. Perfect. The next one we're going to draw is the 2-point area. Essentially the area that the player scores 2 points if they score. So 2-point area. And that's going to be, so this one, essentially, it's in the first quadrant. So we're going to do window width divided by 4. And then there's about 10 characters in 2 points area, so we're going to offset it by 10 more. And then we're going to do in the middle of the screen, so we're going to do window weight by 2. And then again, we're going to limit it to the size of the window here. And then the 1-point area is essentially on the opposite side of the 2-point area. So all we got to do is just do 3/4 of the screen instead of 1/4. Perfect. So let's see what we've got. Boom. Perfect. So you see our score, our 2-point area, our line, and then our 1-point area. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start adding the objects. So I'm going to start with our goalie, or our square, our goalie square. So I'm going to call it box size, and it's going to be a 100 by 100 pixel size square, and it's going to have a X position. I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to put a Y position at 0. And then we are going to draw that square to the screen. So let's do rectangle here. And so the mode we're going to use is a filled value. So essentially it's going to be a filled or fully colored square. The X is going to be X and Y, and then the width and height is just box size. Perfect. So one thing you're going to see in a second is, so now I'm rendering it to the screen, and you see it's on the far left of the screen. What we want it to be is on the right of the screen. So we're going to essentially need to update the X coordinate. And then the other thing that you'll see is it's like hiding, or the score. I mean, you can't really see the scores because they're both white, but yeah, we'll essentially make sure that the score is visible here. So to do that, we're going to set our X to the window width. The problem is if we do that, since LÖVE 2D renders the top left corner or edge, or corner actually, of the shape, if we do window width, the box is going to be off the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring it back by 100 pixels, essentially the size of the box. And so now what this is going to do is it's going to render it at the position X coordinate 400 instead of 500. So if I do that, now you'll see the box is in the top right of the screen, and we can see our score. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move our box up and down. So to do that, let me close out of this. There we go. So to do that, what we're going to do is in our love.update function, we're going to, actually before we do that, we're going to define a delta y, which is by how much the box will move every time the game updates. And then we're going to call a variable gravity, and this is by how much delta y is going to be changed, or delta y is going to change value. And we're going to set the gravity to 10. So essentially the box is going to move 10 pixels every time the game updates. And so because the game is updating and we want to, this is like an updatable behavior, we want to go to our love.update. And so essentially what we're going to do is if the y value of the box is less or equal to 0, meaning the top of the screen, then what we want to do is we want to make our delta y equal gravity. AKA we want delta y to be a positive number, so that y will be incremented with and become a larger number, bring the box down the screen. And if we want to bring the box back up, essentially if y is greater or equal to the window height, then what we'll do is dy is going to be equal, dy is going to be equal to negative gravity. So essentially y will become a smaller number. And so what we need to do here is essentially make our y change. So we're going to just do y plus dy. Perfect. So now what we'll see is that the box is going to move up and down, but you can see it's moving off the map. So what we're going to do is we need a bound when the box goes down. And so to do that, in our else if component, we're essentially going to need to, instead of limiting it to 500, which is the window height, we need to limit it by 400 because the box size is 100. So we're just going to subtract it by the box size. And now we should be getting it bounded between the two. Perfect. So now the other thing that we need to do, right, is build or design a player. And so for the player actually is taking user input. So essentially we're going to, click our arrow keys to move the player. And so what we want to do here is if love.keyboard is down, essentially this is tracking our keyboard to see what's going on. So if we press the down arrow key, we want to move a player y value, so the y coordinate of the player, we want to bring him down. So what we're going to do is essentially it's going to be equal to py, or the player y, play y plus gravity, because we want to make our player y value larger. One of the things that we didn't do is define our player starting coordinates. So we're going to set py to 0, so or at 10, and then player x coordinate at 10. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to replicate this 4 times for when we press the up key and then the left arrow key and then the right arrow key. So if we're going up, we essentially need to make the player y value smaller. If we're going left, we need to make the x value smaller. So we're just going to update this to player x. And if we're going right, we need to make it bigger. Perfect. And then we just need to draw our player. So our player is a circle. So love.graphics.circle. We're also going to fill it in. It's going to take our px and py coordinates, and then we're going to give it a radius of 10. So now if I draw it, you'll see we have our circle in the top right, and now we can move across the screen. But you'll see there's no collisions with anything. It's kind of moving all over the place. So we're going to add collisions. So to do collisions, essentially what we're going to check is whether or not the player x and y coordinates are within the box x and y coordinates. So essentially what we're doing is if py is bigger or equal than y, which is the top of the box, and if py is less or equal to the size of the box, so y plus box size, then we check if it's in the same x coordinate. So then you can do player x is greater or equal than the box x, and px is smaller or equal to x plus equal to box size then. And so what we're going to do is if this happens, we're going to reset our player x and y to 10, to the starting position, to make it nice and easy. And what I'm realizing is I forgot an if statement here. Boop. And so now, I didn't want one PT. There we go. Now, if the ball collides with the square, you see we're resetting to the top of the screen. Okay, so now one of the things that we're going to add is our projectile. So for our projectile, what we want to do is essentially when we press the space bar, we want to shoot a projectile. So what we're going to do is in the keys press, we're going to add another key to be able to be pressed, which is just the space bar. And if that's pressed, then we're going to create a projectile to true. And then we're going to set a projectile X value to our player X, so that it's starting from wherever the player is shooting. And projectile Y coordinate is going to be where our player Y value is. Perfect. And then what we're going to do is, since we need our projectile to move from left to right, if essentially projectile is true, right, if you press the space bar, if that's true, then the projectile X value, we're going to increment it at the speed of everything else. So projectile X plus gravity. If not, if projectile is not true, the projectile X is just player X, and projectile Y is just player Y. Perfect. And so now what we need to do is we need to draw one more component to the screen, which is love.graphics.rectangle. It's going to be a fill. It's going to be projectile X and projectile Y, and we're going to make it small, so it's going to be a 5x10 rectangle. So now if I go here, I'm moving the player, and if you press the space bar, you see the projectile going. The thing is, there's no collision, there's nothing, no score yet. So we're going to set the projectile collision and the score at the same time. So to do that, we're going to go back to the top here, and we're going to set a player score, so P score, and we'll set that to 0. And then in our score print statement here, we're going to add a toString P score. And so now what it's going to do is going to show scores, colon, space, and then our player score. So now what we want to do is essentially increment our score. So if the projectile X coordinate is equal to the window width, which essentially is the right hand side of the screen, if it reaches that point, then we want it to count as a point. So what we're going to do is we're going to do P score is equal to P score plus 1. And then what we're going to do is just end it here. Now the other thing we want to do is we want to add collision with the box. Essentially, we want to lose this point if the projectile collides with the box. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take our player collisions, we're going to bring that back down, and we're going to replace all of our PX and PYs to projectile Y and projectile X. So this is a quick and easy way to update it. But instead of resetting it to position 10, we're going to reset it to wherever the player is. Now the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to reduce our score. So essentially if we hit the box, it's going to take a point away from us. Perfect. So let's see it in action. So boom, I scored a point. You can see like +1. Boom, +2, or now I'm at 2. And now I hit the square, and oh, okay, I'm having a hard time hitting the square. Oh, something weird is happening. You see it's like shooting a lot of different projectiles. And so that's because what I didn't do is I forgot to set the projectile to false. Essentially, if it hits the square, there will be no more projectile. So now if I hit the score point, oh, a point, here we go. Nope, no points, a point. Now I'm going to hit the square, and there's I lost a point and there's no more projectiles. So now what we want to do is we want to score 2 points if we're in the 2 points area and 1 point if we're in the 1 point area. And so to do that, in our score here, we're going to add one more constraint here, that if px is beyond the middle of the screen, essentially in the 1 point area, then we're going to score 1 point. If not, so else, that means we're in the first half of the screen, and so we're going to do p score is equal to p score plus 2. Yes, and then end. And then if you score the point, what we're going to do is we're going to reset our projectile x to px, and then our projectile y to py. And then we're also going to set projectile to false until we hit the spacebar again. Now the one thing is, to add some difficulty, what we're going to do is if you're shooting from the 2 point area, you're just going to lose 1 point if you hit the square, but you're going to lose 2 points if you hit the square from the 1 point area. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to bring essentially this logic in here. And essentially in this case, we're going to do -2 if you're in the second half of the screen, and then you're going to do -1 if you're in the first half of the screen. And we're going to remove this projectile. Perfect. So now we should have everything working. So we got our ball. If the ball hits the screen or the square, you get reset to the top left. If I shoot from the 2 points area, I just scored 2 points. If I shoot from the 1 point area, I get 1 point. If I hit the square, I lost 1 point. And if I hit the square, I lost 1 point from the 2 point area, and I lost 1 point from the 1 point area. There we go. Seems like there's a little bit of a image glitch going on here. I'm not entirely sure why. I believe this... I think this is the problem. I just want to set the projectile to false. There we go. So what was happening was I had like multiple positions X and Y for my player, and when I was hitting the square, I was resetting the projectile at the PX, PY, where after I had already moved my player. So yeah, so here we go, our very basic game, and I'll make all this code available, and you know, hopefully this was a great way for you to get started like I did with LÖVE 2D. And I'm planning on releasing a couple more of these kind of tutorial videos, so stay tuned and follow along. Thank you so much. It's like that,